You might expect human rights to merit unequivocal support at the United Nations, especially at the UN Human Rights Council, based in Geneva, Switzerland, where 47 member countries hotly debate efforts to promote and protect human rights around the globe. In reality, majorities are often thin, with a surprising number of nations sustaining or even voting no on resolutions advancing human rights. In October 2024, for example, fewer than half, just 23 nations, endorsed a one-year extension of an international fact-finding mission to Sudan, where a civil war has created an ongoing, dire humanitarian and human rights crisis. 12 nations, including China and Indonesia, voted against the resolution, and 12 others abstained. If there's a strong consensus to be found of late, it's on the margins of the UN, among a broad coalition of nonprofit agencies, urging the Human Rights Council to extend the mandate of an independent expert committed to protecting LGBTQ people from violence and discrimination. The vote on the mandate's 3-year renewal is expected to be close.
I'll be there when you need me. You can count on it every time. It won't always be easy, but just as sure as the sun will rise, I'll be there when you need me. With every tear that falls from your eyes, oh, you have me completely. I'll be there I'll be there when you need me.
I'm David Hunt. For all its work as a peacekeeping body, the United Nations has something in common with military organizations: a love of acronyms. In this program, I'll try to keep them to a minimum. But one acronym you'll hear over and over is IE-SOGI. IE is short for Independent Expert. SOGI, S-O-G-I, is short for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. At the UN, IE-SOGI is a man, South African scholar Graham Reed, and a mandate, a position created under the UN's Special Procedures Mechanism to ensure, monitor, advise, and publicly report on matters related to human rights violations based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The Council created the 3-year position in 2016 and renewed it twice, in 2019 and again in 2021. This week's vote, to renew the mandate for another 3 years, comes at a fraught time for the global LGBTQ movement. Fabiana Leibl is a program manager at the International Service for Human Rights in Geneva, an organization that supports human rights defenders around the world through training, activism, research, and legal advice. ISHR works on the front lines in some of the world's most challenging areas, promoting rights and accountability in autocratic nations, strengthening laws and systems in struggling democracies, and supporting human rights activists in regions enduring war, violence, and targeted oppression. Leibl has a front-row seat to this week's pivotal vote at the UN Human Rights Council. She spoke with me from the Council's headquarters in the Palace of Nations, a sprawling complex overlooking Lake Geneva, built to house the League of Nations after the First World War. I asked her about the upcoming vote to renew IE-SOGI and why some members of the Human Rights Council are expected to oppose the resolution.
This time around, we have what we call a technical rollover, which is basically a very short resolution that just states what the mandate is and then asks for the renewal. One of the main objections has always been that it's a myth at the same time that this is a mandate that's driven by what they call Western values, despite it being a resolution that's presented by 7 Latin American countries. There are a number of grounds on which this is objected, from kind of religious claims around religious practices, claims around cultural norms and family values, which are absolutely not in conformity with UN human rights standards. there are many different claims, but they come from a place of intolerance and a place of discrimination against sexual orientation and diverse sexual orientation and gender identities.
Do you expect this to be a close vote?
Yes. It's a political moment and environment that's not conducive to advancing the rights of LGBTQI persons at the international stage. Like, what we want is to secure that this mandate continue its very important and key work, because the resolution doesn't create any rights, doesn't propose any new language. It's basically the continuation of the work of the independent expert. We expect a close vote, yes. And also, beside the votes, there's also the attempts to weaken the text, attempts to make the empty the resolution of meaning and relevance. So, yes.
To counter this opposition, a coalition of more than 1,200 NGOs, non-governmental organizations, signed a statement of support for the renewal of IE-SOGI. Trans activist Best Chitsanjupong read this statement at a meeting of the Human Rights Council in late June.
In every region of the world, violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity persists. In 2016, the UN Human Rights Council took definitive action to systematically address this abuse, creating independent expert on SOGI. Since then, mandate holders have sent over 171 communications documenting allegations of violations and carry out 10 country visits. A decision by Council members to renew this mandate would send a clear message that violence and discrimination against people of diverse sexual orientation and gender identity cannot be tolerated. It would reaffirm that specific attention continues to be crucial to address this human rights violation and ensure that LGBT people are in fact free and equal in dignity and rights. We urge the Council to ensure we continue building a world where everyone can live free from violence and discrimination. I thank you.
In time, you know, everything we've lost comes on again, and I will grab onto your arm a little stronger than we were before.
You're listening to This Way Out, the international LGBTQ radio magazine. I'm David Hunt. IE-SOGI, the United Nations independent expert on violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, has worked since 2016 to advance the human rights of LGBTQ people around the globe. It's critical work in an increasingly fractured world. 64 countries still outlaw same-sex sexual activity, and 10 criminalize diverse gender expression and identities. But efforts to secure the human rights of LGBTQ people have improved in some countries in the past decade. Since the IE-SOGI mandate was established in 2016, 14 countries have decriminalized gay sex. The United Kingdom, responsible for colonial-era anti-sodomy laws around the world, apologized to Commonwealth leaders in 2018, urging repeal of those laws. Fabiana Leibl, a program manager for ISHR, the International Service for Human Rights, says the independent expert's work is needed now more than ever.
I think the ISOGI's mandate is crucial because it deals with issues that perhaps couldn't be dealt with at the national level. Another fundamental aspect of the mandate is the mandate's ability to comment on policy and legislation, and particularly question governments when laws and legislation are violating the rights of people in general. And I think the ISOG has also done an incredible job in addressing those situations and commenting on legislation and submitting information and asking for clarification. And this is another aspect of the mandate which is really important. The fact that the mandate has visited so many countries also is, the visit itself provides a platform for civil society organizations. The recommendations that come out of those visits are a great tool for civil society organizations to work on, to to follow up on, to keep, pushing their governments?
The coalition of NGOs campaigning for renewal of the mandate is active on social media, where the hashtag #RenewIESoji is used to publicize informational webinars and online petitions. I sat in on one of those webinars hosted by the Carr-Ryan Center for Human Rights at the Harvard Kennedy School last week. Jessica Stern, a Carr-Ryan Senior Fellow and formerly the State Department's top envoy for LGBTQ rights, recalled the hard-fought effort to create the IESoji mandate in 2016.
We started with joint statements, voluntary ones, to test whether any government would even dare to say our names in the halls of power. Then we secured the first resolution at the Human Rights Council, recognizing violence and discrimination based on SOGI. I will never forget what it was like to be in the room that day, watching a third of the room walk out in protest during the first panel. And then watching them reappear moments later on the mezzanine, watching from above because they couldn't stay away. That moment made something clear. Visibility is power, and our power is exactly what they feared.
Another featured speaker, scholar and activist Ignacio Saiz, summarized some of his findings from a 2024 report on IESoji.
The mandate has significantly expanded the body of knowledge on violence and discrimination based on SOGI. What so many have valued is how it's looked not just at specific forms of abuse, like conversion therapy or denial of gender recognition. It's looked at the root causes. And that's quite unusual for a UN human rights body. So it's really shone a spotlight on patriarchal gender constructs, legacies of colonialism, religious fundamentalisms, and how religion is politically manipulated for certain ends. And that systemic analysis, that systematic analysis, has enabled it to take on some of the deeper cultural narratives that pathologize, that demonize, and that criminalize queer lives.
Back in Geneva, Fabiana Leibl awaits the vote at the Human Rights Council with grim determination.
It's hard to be optimistic at this point in time, particularly because what we've seen are challenges to multilateralism. That is what we're seeing. It's not only about the UN, it's about norms, standards, guarantees at the international level that are being disregarded. So it's hard to be optimistic when the whole system is not responding the way we would have expected to respond, and that states are actively working against it.
A victory at the UN for IESoji would be welcome news for human rights activists around the world, a spark of hope in challenging times. I'd like to thank Fabiana Leibl at the International Service for Human Rights for speaking with me for this program, and the Carr-Ryan Center at Harvard for its public education efforts. For This Way Out, I'm David Hunt.
The air is clear with our loved ones close. You can pick out every star without a telescope. So beautiful to see how we have changed. In time, everything we've lost comes on again, and I will grab onto your arm a little stronger.